Hello, friends, and welcome to Soul Channel. I am so excited for today's episode. I get to introduce you to somebody who I have been following for a very, very long time because she has wisdom, and I want to bring her wisdom to you. My name is Teresa Warrenstaff. I'm an intuitive, I'm a channel, and this is Soul Channel, where we gather. It's a place for seekers to gather, raise consciousness, normalize spirituality, intuition, and change the world. And today we get to talk with Pam Younghans. She is a local Seattleite, which I'm thrilled about. It's so nice to be able to talk to somebody who's local. Let me tell you a little bit about Pam, and I'm going to read from her bio because she is brilliant and has such a rich history in her skills. Pam's journey into the world of astrology began in the late 1970s, in the days when PCs weren't common. And astrological charts were calculated and drawn by hand. Could you imagine? That's a lot of work, right? She started giving personal readings in the mid 80s and founded her business, North Point Astrology, in 2001. Pam believes the tools such as astrology can help facilitate our life journey in profound ways and on many levels, practically, psychologically, and spiritually. Her approach to astrology is based on her understanding that there is order and positive intention in the universe, that the planets and stars are our teachers, our guides, and that our natal charts reveal our soul's plan, intentions, and timelines for our current life. And that's what this is all about. It's all about giving you the tools to connect to your soul's plan so you know, so you can evolve and grow into the best life available to you now. So, welcome, Pam. Thank
Oh,
you so much.
thank you, Teresa. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. And it is fun to know that we're probably 45 miles away from each other, but still that seems close given what we connect with these days through Zoom.
Isn't it amazing? I
Mhm.
agree. Nowadays, we connect with people all over the world. So, having somebody local is a treat. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you can see, I live in a log home. Um, let's see. So just to give my background, gave a little bit of that in the bio, but my introduction to astrology was, and even to this whole metaphysical world, was really early on. My own mom, she grew up in a spiritualist church, so she knew her guides and everything. So this was really, she was way ahead of her time. Um, so when I was growing up, her bookshelf had books about Edgar Cayce and Ruth Montgomery and Arthur Ford and all of these wonderful channels and mediums of the era. And so this is my background. Um, and I remember going to the library with her, and I remember one specifically, she brought home a book about the years that Jesus spent in India. So, I mean,
Wow.
her spiritual focus was diverse and always exploring. And so that is something I really inherited and was really a big part of my childhood. So, and her best friend was an astrologer. So that helped. And I think she gave me a little bit of a tiny reading when I was in my teens. And then she gave me a book, just had like astrology keywords. And then when I was 20, for my 20th birthday, I decided I was going to get an astrology reading. So I went to a professional astrologer named Paul Grell. He was the author of the book my mom's friend had given me. And he lived in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area. So I went to his house and he gave me a reading that lasted 4 hours. I mean, this was intense. And this was my introduction to astrology. So then listen to this. So for the next, I don't know how many months, I had recordings. So tape recordings. So for the next many, many months, I would sit at the typewriter, no computers, at the typewriter, and typed out the transcript to those 4 hours so that I would have them to review and to really get to understand my own chart. So that really was a deep dive. And from there, I think I took one introductory class just at a junior college. It wasn't a major deal. But then I just read books and explored charts, and it's kind of how I've done a lot of things in my life. I'm kind of self-taught in many ways. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Wow.
that's the background anyway.
That's phenomenal. And it's so inspiring. Your mom must have been an absolutely amazing role model for you.
Yeah, yeah, I still tear up. I mean, she passed in 2007, but I still feel very close to her. And yeah,
Yeah. You're very lucky. And I can feel that she is always with you, and which is beautiful. And I love that. I think the foundation that I hear and feel is that she taught you to trust yourself and to follow what had heart and meaning for you. And
yeah,
that's a very special message.
yes, yeah, that's well said. Thank you for bringing that forward in words.
You're welcome. And so your relationship to astrology started young.
Mhm, mhm.
And what was it about astrology that you said this is the path I'm going to take, and tell me a little bit about your evolution with astrology and what drew you to it as um, a practice.
Okay. Well, for I would kind of dip in and out of it. I was really immersed in my early 20s, and then I fell in love and and blah blah blah. You do the journey. And there were times within that I'd get really, when some big issue was up, I'd dive back into my astrology chart and explore all the transits, especially when I was curious about whether this relationship was going to bear fruit or not. It's like, is he going to choose me? So there were times I really dove into it again, but then I went off on life. Um, but when that relationship ended, like many people, it's kind of that life crisis that draws us into exploring something more about ourselves or our spirituality or something along those lines. And it's very interesting. So when he departed, I got drawn, and I just have to say, got drawn. It's not like somebody speaks in my ear, but I just kind of things happen. They just happen. They just pull you in some way. So I ended up at a metaphysical store in Bellevue and
Wow.
got very into crystals and and everything that they offered. And then I started working there, and then I became the manager, and then I started doing readings, astrology readings. So that's how it came that way. And it's interesting the way I started doing readings. There was another woman working at the store, and she could do past life readings. She didn't regress people, but she got all the information. And she was nervous about starting to do readings, and I was nervous about starting to do live readings. I'd done written reports for people, um, and the manager wanted us to do stuff, and so we made the pact. Okay, you start and I'll start. We'll do this together. So it was kind of challenging each other to have the courage to go do this in person, and so everything looking back, it just felt like kind of the natural confluence. It wasn't a concrete decision. It's just the way my life unfolded. And I can look back at my own astrology and say, oh, wow, well, Uranus was conjunct my midheaven. So, of course, I went into astrology. I mean, there's all kinds of things I can look at and say, oh, yeah, of course. But does that answer your question?
It does. And I love how it answers my question because it illustrates that when we pay attention and we listen to those gentle nudges that our
Mm,
soul and our guides give us, that
yeah,
they're going to take us exactly where we need to go. That's such an important message in my world. I
Yeah,
believe it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
So what's your favorite part of astrology?
Oh gosh, you bring tears to my eyes. Like this is, I don't tend to be overly emotional, but certain things really touch me. So, what I love about astrology on a practical, almost mental level, my moon's in Virgo. Virgo likes to analyze, and moon shows what we love. So, I love jigsaw puzzles and crossword puzzles and bringing things together and making things better. And that's Virgo stuff. So I love looking at somebody's chart, which to me, looking at somebody's chart is like reading their diary, that you're picking up the different pieces. Their different planets represent different parts of their personality. So you're seeing how this part works with that part. And it's very complex, but it's really fun because, and then when you're talking in person with somebody, even if you've seen a configuration in a couple of people's charts, everybody's story is unique. So you get to see how that's playing out. And you get to, I mean, a lot of things come through in a reading that you don't know where they come from. I know you know that. They just all of
Yeah.
a sudden pop out of your mouth and it's there. And it's like, okay, well, that was fun. Um, but it is so rewarding to have aha moments, to get the glimmer in somebody's eye or the look of relief on their face to say, "Oh, I'm not going crazy," or and then to feel like you've contributed in some way to their growth, whether it's emotional healing or spiritual path or any way that something's manifesting in their lives. There's just no reward greater than that for somebody with their moon in Virgo. Sorry, Virgo's the sign of the healer, so we want to make things better, and that's a great reward.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Pam. And I can feel everything you said because I don't think there's any greater reward than having influence in somebody's life and making it better, whether it's through information or understanding, whether
Mhm.
it's directional or aspirational. I think anytime we can do that, we're doing the right thing. We're moving in the right direction. So
Exactly.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
even just
beautiful.
listening. I mean, I'm not a counselor. I do have some background in some counseling techniques, but I'm not a counselor. But even I know that as somebody's sharing their story,
Yeah.
maybe they're doing it for the first time or they're doing it at a deeper level. And because I'm not part of their family, they can do it differently. There's something very healing even in that step of the process. So there's that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to touch in on your gift. So you have that one-on-one connection that you create with your clients through the readings, and it sounds like you're direct knowing. So, it's multi-disciplined reading. You also take time every day to post the forecast, and that's how I found you. And,
Oh,
let
okay.
me share my experience and
Okay.
why I admit it, I sought her out and I convinced her to come on to Soul Channel with me because when I read your forecast, you validated my experience.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
You told me that what I was feeling and experiencing energetically was in fact true and correct. And again, we'll go back to I don't think there's any greater gift that we can give than to have a positive influence on somebody's well-being. So you do a 3-part daily forecast. So I would love it if you would take us through each of the parts as well as anything else that you want to share, because I know you post on a lot more than just the forecast. So I'm going to give you some creative license here on how you want to bring everybody into that
Okay.
world.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I mean, So you're mostly talking about my Facebook posts. I did start an Instagram page too a few months back. I was very late to Facebook. I Anyway, for various reasons, but I was very late to it. But I did start connecting there a couple of years ago. And then again, one of those things, I don't know how it happened. I got drawn into the solar flare activity. That was about 2 years ago at this point, and I'd paid attention before, but I hadn't really been immersed in it. And it became something that really drew me in. I mean, it's kind of astrological. We're talking about the sun. It's a planetary object in astrology. It's a star in reality. But so there seemed to be this connection. And so I just started, sharing my thoughts about these things and monitoring the flares and monitoring geomagnetic activity. And then I started introducing the astrology into it as well. I think most of the people on my Facebook page are not really into astrology, um, but they're very into the solar flares. But this way I get to, so I think the three pieces you're talking about are solar flare activity,
Mm-hmm.
and then the geomagnetic activity. And once in a while we get a comet or other kinds of things thrown into that mix. And then the astrology for the day. So those are the three parts. And it's just like most things in my life, there was just kind of a natural progression of it coming into form in that way. And I don't know, it's not like I feel like, oh, I'm going to be of service today, but there's something, again, it's probably my moon in Virgo, that emotional fulfillment, you feeling like I'm contributing in some way. And then my moon, so maybe too much astrology for people who don't know astrology, but my moon is in the 11th house, which has to do with community. So here I get to be of service to an online community. So I can see how it plays out in my chart. Uh, anyway,
I
sad
love that.
answer.
Yeah, it does. And
Okay.
help give us some context to
Yeah,
why it's important for us to acknowledge and learn about the influence of solar flares. And then we'll go into the geomagnetic activity as well. But let's focus because I've only been following these symptoms for about 8 months a year. So I'm pretty new to it and learning every day. But what I know is it's changed dramatically in the year that I've been following it. So tell us what it is and then help us understand a little bit about its evolution if you can.
of course. So what it is, so solar flares are eruptions on the sun. The sun has cycles called the solar cycle. They average the length of 11 years. The shortest one on record has been like 9 years. The longest one has been 13 years. So they average 11 years in length. The cycle goes through solar minimum when there aren't very many solar flares, very few sunspots. Sunspots are the places on the sun where the flares erupt from. Then it builds, and about halfway through the cycle, so 5.5 years into an 11-year cycle, we get, I mean, it's a building process, but that's when solar maximum happens, and there are tons of flares and lots of sunspots, and it's just big stuff. And then gradually there's a falling off back down to solar minimum. So our current solar cycle started in late December of 2019. And astronomers can tell this because of something about how the magnetic field on the sun flips. Um, so that started in December 2019. So they anticipated with the average 11-year length that maximum would be in 2025.
Hmm.
But lately, it's been clear that maximum seems to be coming earlier. So now the predictions, there are various astronomical societies around the globe that are saying, no, we think it's in 2024. And they think, there's still a range that gets used, but as early as now through like September, October, I have a sense it's more like September, October. That's just my sense of it. But so that's where we are. So there are lots of solar flares going on. So what the heck does that mean to us? There have been studies done, specifically a Russian scientist. I can't remember the year that this happened, but he studied history historical events and how they related to solar maximums. And he found out that most social unrest and social change happened in the years of solar maximum. So we have proof in history of, wow, something big happens when the sun is active. And then I'm trying to, there are a couple of different roads coming into my brain to go, which way do we go now? Does that make sense? Maybe I should stop and okay.
It does,
Uh,
yes.
okay, good. So that happens, that's society. But of course, that's individual because society is made up of individuals. So during solar maximum, we expect people to be kind of more, doesn't have to be agitated, but there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, what seems to be very interesting is how much more impact this solar cycle, this solar maximum seems to be having compared to other years. People are much more aware of it, but people are much more aware in general. You know, all the podcasts that are now exploring NDEs and past life regression and just things are blossoming. So we're in a blossoming phase anyway. People are becoming more sensitive anyway. And we can equate it to, I mean, so our galaxy, getting to the bigger picture, our galaxy takes 24,000 years to go around to orbit the center of the galaxy. So it's always moving through space. And twice during that 24,000 years, it moves through something called the photon belt. So
Mhm.
we are currently in the photon belt. And that is supposed to be a time. So photons are supposed to work with human consciousness. So we got the overlay of the Earth, well, the whole galaxy moving through the photon belt, which activates consciousness. And then whatever kinds of awarenesses and life crises and changes that were activated by the pandemic. I mean, that really set us up to be in this very critical is a bad word because it sounds negative, but it really is a critical time when so many
Yes.
things are coming together. So we would expect solar maximum to be a time when there's a lot of social change, social unrest. We see that more wars happen. All of that kind of stuff happens during solar maximum. And then on an individual level, there is a long list of the types of symptoms we can get when solar flares happen, especially the bigger ones. And there are great articles out there. I've posted several of them on my page. My sense of solar flare activity is that there are many, many ways that they act, but I think one of the primary actions is kind of a detoxification process. So it's this burst of energy that and different ones coming from the different sunspots seems to have different. I mean, one of them seems to affect the solar plexus. Some of them seem to affect the crown chakra. It just seems like they each have a different intention as well. But depending on where we are, we may get symptoms around that chakra or that area of the body where we've been holding on to emotional energy that needs to be released, just as society is releasing the negativity, whatever else that needs to come to the surface. So that's why following solar flares has become so important to me because of the personal nature of it.
Yeah.
And it's another way I can feel like I contribute, keeping track of those and letting people know. And then the reassurance that, oh, you're not the only one going through this. Lots of people are, every once in a while, you've probably seen I post symptoms check, and people on Facebook, you know, chime in with what they're feeling. And it's really reassuring to know we're not alone. A lot of people are going through kind of challenges, can be emotional, can be physical. I also
Yeah.
find with some solar flares that they seem to aggravate chronic conditions, which of course makes sense. Chronic condition is based on an emotional or psychological issue that um, has gotten stuck in our body somewhere. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, you froze for a sec.
Yeah, and so did you. And I just got a signal that my internet is unstable, and I don't know why that is, but we'll just keep on going.
We'll keep it.
Do you remember what I was saying when we lost each other?
Yeah. we were talking about the symptoms,
Oh,
and
good. Okay.
I think what would be beneficial is
Yeah.
if you can break down some of those symptoms. I know you align them to our individual chakras, and maybe talk about how something influencing our third chakra
Hmm.
would show up for us.
Right. Well, that's a great example because this last one, I mean, we had an X class flare, which is the highest level, just last week. And I felt that in my solar plexus. So I didn't really feel nauseated, but I just didn't feel right. Food wasn't sitting right. My dog threw up twice. The animals are feeling this too.
Yeah.
So, but that, the solar plexus is about personal power. How are you using your personal power? Or there's another level of it too. How are you digesting reality? The stomach
Mhm.
is our digestion process. And then I know a lot of people get headaches, opening up the crown chakra or opening up the third eye. A lot of people get back issues. If I'm sure a lot of people have read Louise Hay's books on how the different body parts correspond with different issues. The back is usually about feeling supported, that kind of thing, standing in our authority. So the different flares seem to activate different things. And it's not always the same for, everybody's feeling this, but they do
Mm.
seem to be trends. My feeling is just like everything, our lives are set up to, work with us individually on what we need to learn or what we need to process. And that's the same way with the solar flares.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, how we
it's,
respond to them is
yeah,
individual for us based on what we need to learn or see or hear or know at that moment of our life. Is that right?
exactly, exactly. What needs to be processed? What's ready to be detoxed? What are we ready to let go of? Or what, sometimes, and I've had this happen too, a flare will come along and I'll feel elated. And that happens for people too. So, they can have varying levels of effect. But of course, people check in most often when they're not feeling so good.
Yes.
That's just
Yeah,
what we do.
yeah. And then
Oh
when we're
gosh, darn
feeling
it,
really
froze
good
again.
and elated, we just go ahead and keep moving forward with our day. So I love that. And for me, I've read everything on symptoms from headaches to nausea to blurred vision to disorientation, hearing issues. I think, and so I think the message I most want to ground with our audience is to trust yourself. If you're
Yeah,
feeling a way, there's a reason, and this can be a source for that symptom. Does that resonate?
yeah, definitely. And I think adding to that is to not attach overly to something that comes up symptomatically with a flare, but to think of it as being a detox process. So you feel the emotions because there can be a lot of emotional content, or you feel the physical issue, but then you don't attach to it. You don't try to label it too much. You allow it to move through you. And of course, there are physical things we can do when solar flares are very active. We need extra rest. Our physical bodies are processing a lot. We need lots of water. I'm very aware when solar flares are up, my mouth dries up like crazy and I can drink gallons of water and electrolyte fluids. Very important to get those minerals in, especially magnesium, since that helps us sleep and helps with muscle cramps and those kind of things as well.
Yep. And I think whether it's a solar flare origin, geomagnetic, or something you're going through, I think that's a really important piece of advice that what I want to highlight. Enzymes really make a difference,
Mhm,
and they can help you move things through yourself more
mhm.
quickly at the physical level. And we're a holistic system. We have emotional,
Right,
physical, mental, spiritual bodies, and we need to attend to each of them. So sitting in meditation isn't always the right answer, right?
right, right. I mean, we want to address it on all levels. all levels. The thought does come to mind, though, that, one meditation we can do is we can often get physical issues based on where the emotional body gets tangled up with the physical body. And so to just do a meditation or just even imagining that emotional body is relaxing and kind of separating from the physical body, that can help as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And I think I misspoke. I think I said enzymes. I meant to say electrolytes.
Oh, yeah.
So
I thought that's what you meant. I thought that's what you meant. And I thought, oh, well, that's fine. Starts with an E. Start with an E.
I'm glad I caught that. I do that with names too. So so we heard from you that we're moving through the proton belt, which is having an influence on our spiritual growth, consciousness,
Okay.
intuition.
It is photon belt, just to let you know.
Photon
Photon belt.
belt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And we also have the solar flares. And the third piece is the geomagnetic activity. So, can you
Right.
tell us a little bit about what that is, how that can influence us, and what you've learned?
Perfect. And I have learned a lot, kind of, especially if people have questions, then I have to research it. So it's fun. Um, so geomagnetic activity, the Earth has a magnetic field. When solar flares or other things explode on the sun, because magnetic filaments can explode, there are other things that can happen on the sun that create what are called CMEs, coronal mass ejections. These don't happen with every solar flare or every explosion, but what's interesting is that the energy of a solar flare, we'll just use this as an example, it travels at the speed of light. So the immediate energy gets to us in 8 minutes, immediate, right
Wow.
away. That's why we feel those symptoms right away. But if a CME, a coronal mass ejection, is released at the same time, which is just a cloud of debris, plasma, protons, electrons, there we get to use the protons. Um, that releases a cloud, and then depending on how fast the solar wind is moving, it reaches Earth like 3 to 5 days later. So we get a second wave sometimes, not always. These geomagnetic storms, and they have levels of intensity, but those are what cause the auroras. The auroras are the interaction of the energies, the debris and protons, electrons coming from the sun interacting with the Earth's magnetic field creates these beautiful auroras. But geomagnetic storms, they seem to have, they certainly cause similar symptoms to the solar flare activity. Um, I don't know how much to differentiate between the two. It's just like one is an extension of the other. Sometimes we have a longer period in which to work with the energies from that specific eruption. We could look at it that way. And also, I want to mention that, it's just not only at the time of an event, solar flare, or it's supposed to take us at least 3 days to integrate, adjust to the energies of these kinds of events. So, yeah, but a lot of people during the geomagnetic storms get the headaches because think of it, it is pressure. It's pressure on the Earth's magnetic field. So it's pressure energetically on us. And it's the electromagnetic storms that actually tend to cause more of when they're really strong, they can cause the technological issues and computer glitches and all of that kind of things. The satellites can come down out of the sky as they did last year sometime. We had a big storm and like, I don't know, there were a lot of satellites that had just been sent up that came crashing down because of the wave of energy that came through.
I love that because it really expands our perception on what can be influencing how we feel. And I think that's so important that we understand our energy systems and are able to A, validate our experience, and then B, navigate. My favorite saying is don't pitch tent, keep going. So, how to navigate
Mm-hmm.
these opportunities.
Perfect. I do want to mention here, and I think said this in our little promo for the for our talk here today about calling things cosmic coincidence. And this relates to astrology, but I think of it now with what we're talking about as well. That so in astrology, even though I use the terms like, oh, and Pluto is doing this to you or something like that, I hope I don't use so exact words, but to me, it's more that the cosmos are a reflection of us. And so even things like solar flares and solar maximum is more a reflection of what we're going through rather than a causative factor. So I like to call it a cosmic coincidence. This is happening and this is happening. It's very interesting, isn't it, how they're both happening at the same time?
So that would bring us into the topic of fate and free will, right?
Ah, that's a really good question. That's a lot of people do ask me about that. So the way I like to answer this. So my vision of, call it reality if you want, is that before our lifetime, we sit down at a table, conference table with our guides and whomever else, and we decide what we want to experience in the lifetime ahead. Now, it's not down to every breath, every mouthful. It's not to that level. However, I know from astrology that certain decisions are made before we're incarnating. We decide what our parents are. We just, an astrology chart has different areas of life experience, our home environment, our our work environment, our sense of purpose, So there are areas, I believe we choose our time of birth. So we choose our charts, which means our soul uses a lot of our free will before we even get here. So in the lifetime itself, we continue to have free will, but we do have kind of a setup. We came into a family with certain configurations. We came in with certain personality structures. We came in with this. How do we work with it? So there continues to be free will, but it's not at the same level as we have from the soul level, not to the same extent that we have on the soul level. And I like to visualize, so again, sitting at our conference table with our soul family and guides, looking at the timeline of a life and seeing specific times. Oh, Pluto transit. Oh, Uranus transit. Knowing that there will be specific times of the life that are going to be more crucial or more change oriented or more transformational. So I think we know that and we kind of have that set up, but then how those are actually going to play out depending on all the choices we've made up to that point, and then how we respond to the situation when it arises or the opportunity.
I agree 100%. You and I are lockstep with that belief.
Good.
I think I do think we sit at that table and we lay out our life, and we also determine we're going to learn this lesson and we're going to offer this opportunity, and then we get onto the planet and it becomes human free will. How do we choose to respond to the thing that's coming into our life?
Right. Right. Exactly. Very
Which
good.
is why it's so vital for us to stay sovereign, to stay autonomous and in our own authority so that we choose and that choice doesn't become a default setting. And it also brings to mind life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.
Yeah, I love that quote. That's perfect. It's really a good thing to remember always.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been so this has been so enlightening and validating for me, and as I'm sure it is for our audience, to understand that we have our own cosmic mm, petri dish of things that are going on within us, right?
Mhm, mhm.
That help to determine how we navigate our life. And there are so many influences out there, and I'm sure that the photon belt and the geomagnetic activity and the solar flares also contributes to the Earth's evolution. So on the more macro level,
Hmm.
and we're sandwiched in the middle, right?
Yeah,
We've got the
yeah,
cosmos and the
yeah,
Earth, everything's shifting.
exactly.
Beautiful. So any final thoughts or anything
Yeah,
else that you want to share with our audience?
I think I want to at least talk briefly about the energies we're working with this year. So first of all, I've talked about solar maximum, which is likely to be this year rather than next. So that's an increase in the energies. And then the two planets, Jupiter and Uranus, are going to align in late April. Now, they align every 13 to 14 years. So it's not like a once in a lifetime deal. However, it's occurring at the same time as solar maximum. We also have comet coming through in April that usually tends to, activate more kind of fateful things, and it's all occurring during eclipse season. So we get usually four eclipses a year, two and then two, 6 months apart from each other. And eclipses are, they can feel very fated. They feel very important. They're very much turning point oriented. So I just want to mention that because we have kind of a confluence of energies that's going to be very strong, I think, in March, April especially, but carries through in various ways throughout the rest of the year. But I would at least want to mention that. I'm actually very excited about the Jupiter Uranus thing as we get Jupiter, who is about doing stuff big, and it's always, he's the greatest, largest planet of the solar system that we know of. He's called the Greater Benefic. He's kind of the Santa Claus. It's not that everything that he touches turns to gold, but paired with Uranus, which interestingly enough, so the outer planets have kind of two levels. Uranus is the planet of change and um, not transformation, but I'm not going to even come up with the right word for it. New thoughts, new ideas, um, inventiveness, and coming into new ways of approaching reality. It's also the planet of rebellion and that kind of thing, but it's leaving an old form behind and making big changes so that we can open to something new. The cool thing is that at its higher octave, Uranus is a planet of higher consciousness.
Ah,
And looking at Jupiter, largest planet, combining with Uranus, the planet of higher consciousness, and given where we are right now, with everybody already kind of opening up and becoming more sensitive and all of that that's already laying a groundwork, there's some interesting potentials here for I did a webinar. I do a webinar 3 times a year, and last one I called Breakthroughs and Awakenings. So at its best, its most elevated expression, that's what we can look forward to with the Jupiter Uranus alignment as well. So I just wanted to leave that. That's kind of, um, I don't know, exciting to think about. So,
thank you.
mhm.
So, what's the best way to prepare for what's coming in
Mm.
March, April?
Stay grounded, body, listen to what it needs. Don't assume.
Yeah.
Live as much as possible in a flow. I know for people who have, strict schedules or families or anybody they have to work around, that can be more challenging, but to stay in center as much. I have some meditations that I use. My favorite ones are the ones that connect to the divine self. Oh,
Mhm.
so connecting to the divine self um, just really focuses that energy inward, and then catching yourself throughout the day when stray thoughts come in or energies seem a little wonky, and just calling in your soul. If you call in your soul throughout the day, first of all, if you do that just sitting with your eyes closed and call in your soul, for me, it's a kind of immediate, like a cosmic hug or something. It just feels very comforting. So the more we can connect to, these higher aspects of our own being, the more we'll be able to navigate, whether it's lots of solar flares or changes going on in society or anything like that. It's about finding that center point within. Does that
Yeah,
help?
it does a lot. It helps a lot. And I think that's good advice, not only for March, April, for life in general.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you, Pam. This
Hmm.
has been an amazing conversation. I
Oh,
know
I've
I've
loved it.
learned so much.
Had a wonderful time. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thank you. So please let everybody know where they can find you, because I know now I can feel the people lining up who want to
Oh,
have a reading, or how can they find you?
yeah. So the best way is especially if you're interested in a reading, but if you want to read my weekly journal, I write a weekly forecast, goes up every Sunday. My website, north www.northpointastrology.com. It's my business name, North Point Astrology. You can find me on Facebook under my name. You can find me on um, Instagram under my name, and you can always sign up for my weekly journal. I send it out by email, so that's a possibility. But yeah, if you're interested in a reading, go to the chart interpretation page of my website. It lists the information I need from you to get started. At the very minimum, I need where you live because I need to send you appointment times in your time zone, um, that kind of thing. So that's the place to get started, and I welcome it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will be sure and add links to the YouTube release, as well as send this out in email so you all know where to find Pam. And again, thank you so much for being here, Pam. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I know this has been another amazing episode. Be well.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.